So we just had week one. This is actually, we were supposed to record last night. My internet had a problem. I had to call the repairman. It cost me $700 to fix. I'm livid about it. Nevertheless, here we are. And now we're going to go back to talking about week one. How do you, like, just overarching, not like any specific players, just like overarching, you are a fantasy analyst, you're looking at week one. How are you reacting to it? Or what are you doing? What is it that you do here?
I think that the most important thing to remember with week one is to not always assume that things are linear, and to remember that, like, when we look at anything that happened from week one, I think it's important to ask yourself, how would I feel if this happened in week 11 and for the first 10 weeks of the season it went roughly how I was expected for this player? And, generally, I think that could help inform you, right? Kendrick Bourne has a massive game in week one. We probably shouldn't care, right? Like, if that's something where, like, it's going to take a lot from Kendrick Bourne to disprove what we think of Kendrick Bourne at this point. But, it's relative to the sample. A rookie comes out and does something massive in week one. We're going to talk about two of them who were really impressive. I think that should, flip your scale quite a bit more. It's important to just kind of think of all the different stories that the season could possibly tell about that player and how that week one fits in, and then what you think is more likely. Is this the story of how this guy became a breakout star? Is this the story of how this guy was a massive bust? Is this the story of how he had one random good week in midst of several other good weeks or bad weeks or whatever else, and it just happened to come first? Because sometimes things just happen to come first, or they happen to come last, and it doesn't always mean everything. We'll talk about it when we get into Cam Akers, but I thought that was an example of this offseason where everybody needs to have an explanation for everything. And with Akers, it was kind of easy because there was a very plausible explanation of the Achilles. And it was like, what if he just finally pieced it together, right? What if the Akers we saw in the last month is the only Akers? And to me, it's a balancing act. That's one possible explanation. The other possible explanation is that he's just been a mostly mediocre, injured timeshare running back who happened to have a really hot stretch, and it happened to be the last thing that we saw. And which of those we should action probably just depends on what the cost is, right? And that's ultimately what I've come down to for everything from week one, is like, whatever the most optimistic scenario is or pessimistic scenario is for someone who really surprised you in week one, how is the market reacting to that? And if the market thinks that it's very likely to be the true scenario, probably going to be on the other side of it. And if the market isn't really buying into it, then I'm probably willing to buy into it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. It's similar to how I do it. I'm pretty much like confirming priors in week one way or the other, and just ignoring what doesn't go to plan. So, like, we're going to talk about them later, but like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and like a 15 pass offense, I'm like, I don't care. They're good players. It's going to happen. T. Higgins getting 0 catches on 7 targets or whatever. I'm like, I don't care. Joe Burrow throwing for 82 yards or whatever it was. I'm like, I don't care. None of this stuff matters to me. What I'm looking for is the players that I don't have a strong, what's the word? I don't have a strong prior on. So I'm like, I wanted to see how this guy did because I didn't really know. I didn't really have a strong take either way.
Yeah.
And, look at what he did. Well, that's interesting. And nobody seems to care. That's even more interesting. Maybe I will go after that guy. Or, the reverse where, look at what he did. Everybody really cares about that. I don't care about it nearly that much. I'm hard passing on that one. If I got him, I'll sell him. And it's like I said, it's really the high and low end where I'm pretty locked in. Nothing changes. I don't care if they put up 300 yards or they went for, I don't know what Brandon Ayuk did, but people seem to be really fired up about that. I'm like,
8, 129, and 2.
I'm like, that's a totally normal outcome for Brandon Ayuk. There's nothing that changes my opinion here. I'm really happy for him. Don't care.
That's a great example, right? Where it's like, we already know that the 49ers, like what we've already seen coming in the 49ers, that anyone could have told you at the end of August was like, it's an offense with 4 really explosive and efficient pass game weapons. And in any given week, one of them can be at the top of their position group. And that and that can be a different guy every single week, but that every guy is live to do that every single week. And so then you have to ask yourself, coming off week one, like, you know, if this performance came in week 14 of last year, everyone would have been like, wow, great week for Brandon Ayuk. And like nobody would have really changed their long-term outlook on Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
Whereas because it happens in week one, you know, you have to ask yourself, is this telling us that this is a new 49ers offense and that it's going to be Ayuk every week? Or is it just like we literally know any of them are capable of being the guy? And we know in any given week someone kind of has to be the guy. And so this week Ayuk is the guy. Yeah. And maybe now he's always going to be the guy, or is it just that all the things that we already knew were true are true? And again, it depends on the cost. Like, yeah, I'm putting my Brandon Ayuk's on the trade block. And if anyone wants to, what I sell for what I would have sold for like the previous week? No, I probably want a little bit extra. He just had 36 fantasy points.
Throw me an extra 2 on top.
Yeah. But if someone's like, no, Brandon Ayuk is the dude, I'm moving up an entire tier off this game. I'm sending you, you know, first and 2 seconds. It's like, yeah, okay. Like we'll move off Ayuk for that. And you know, if I'm wrong and he is the guy, we're insulated a little bit on that. We're fine if we sell him for that. And you know, if we're right, we'll probably be able to buy back later at a better price someday.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like I said, that's kind of what I'm looking at is what are my priors? Are they strongly held? If they're strongly held, then nothing matters. If they're weakly held, or I'm just like in the middle, like I don't really know about this player, I don't have a strong read on the situation, I'll see what happens and go from there, then I'm more willing to adjust.
For sure.
And we're going to talk about some of those guys as well, where it was like, man, I don't know, but you know, I like what happened, or I don't know, but I sure don't like what happened. So yeah, without further ado, unless you have further ado,
no further ado for me.
Without further ado,
we'll go into
week one's biggest surprises, and I'll go first because you've gone first in the past, and it's my turn to go first. And I'm going to talk about your favorite player, and therefore, I'm a monster because I took this off the table. To the listeners of the podcast, I just want you to know that I did up the show sheet, and then I answered all the questions first, so that Jacob didn't get to pick first any times.
True.
So he got all the leftovers. So number one topic is week one's biggest surprises. I went with Anthony Richardson, player I have rallied against for months on Twitter, in the Discord, everywhere. My argument wasn't that he cannot be good at football. It's that he's really freaking expensive, so he better be good at football. And I'd rather just bet on someone that I already know is good at football at those prices. Like really good at football, because that's where he's being drafted. Anyways, I kind of thought Anthony Richardson might be the worst quarterback we've seen get drafted in the first round ever from passing perspective. I thought we might have a week one, in which case it might have been better for Anthony Richardson to just simply spike the ball and try to throw it to a receiver. That didn't happen. He was like, I'm not going to say good because he definitely wasn't good. Let's not get carried away. He was not a good NFL quarterback, but he was a bad NFL quarterback, and that's a notch above what I expected. I thought he would be like a janitor. Like I didn't think that he would be able to complete a pass, and he like completed quite a few. They were in and around the line of scrimmage. Like he only had I just did the rookie report. I don't have it in front of me for the patrons. In the Discord, by the way, sign up for patreon.com/bulletproofff to get all of the stuff. But I just did the rookie report for Anthony Richardson. His ADOT, I think, was around 3 or 4. Which sounds about right. Really embarrassingly bad. But he completed a lot of passes. They let him pass a lot. That was one of the biggest things that I was excited about. I don't know if you're a long-time listener to the podcast, you may remember last year around this time, or maybe it was a little bit later into the season, but it was fairly early. Jacob and I were talking about Justin Fields and what the Bears need to do to develop Justin Fields and how they have betrayed every Bears fan in the history of the world. They're betraying buried grandparents, great-grandparents, like 6 generations ago, parents of Bears fandom have been betrayed. And it was unfair because Justin Fields obviously was not a very good passer. And then they took that and said, hey, you know what? We're not going to win football games if Justin Fields passes, so let's not let him pass, which is completely contrary to what their goal should be, which is develop Justin Fields. The Colts went out and they said, we're probably not going to win games. We're okay with that. Anthony Richardson passed the football. And they let him pass 37 times in the first game. And do you know how many times the Bears? I'm going to ask you because I don't know if you saw my thread earlier. Do you know how many times the Chicago Bears asked Justin Fields to pass 37 times in a game last year?
That must have been like 0.
It was literally 0. Do you know how many times they asked him to pass 36?
Probably zero.
Also 0, 35.
Zero?
Still 0, 34, 33, 32, 31, 29.
29's got to be like 3 or 4.
No, it's freaking 0. They asked him to pass
What?
28 times. This is game high pass attempts last year. So
What?
the Colts are doing
28 was
right.
was his highest?
Yes.
Oh my God. The
Maybe
audio
I got that
listeners
wrong.
must have just
Maybe-
gotten absolutely destroyed by my going, what? Into the mic, but that actually stunned me if that's true.
Here, let me find it. I just put it up. I'm quite certain it was 0 at 28.
What?
It was like the most shocking thing I've seen. Justin Fields topped out at 28 pass attempts in a 35-32 loss to the Dolphins in Week 9. That was his career. I don't know if it was career high. I didn't look at his rookie year. I presume it was his career high pass attempts. So in Week 1, the Colts went out and actually let Anthony Richardson throw the football, which I think is like the best thing that could have possibly happened to Anthony Richardson's potential future. I'm mystified that the Indianapolis Colts are the organization that was able to figure this out. I'm beside myself with shock. I'm shocked. I'm awed. I'm all of it. I'm really excited for Anthony Richardson. I'm not buying Anthony Richardson. Don't get me wrong. That was not a good performance, but it was like an acceptable rookie performance, which is like a really good step in the right direction for Anthony Richardson. I'm holding though, which is a huge difference. I'm holding right now. I believe there is hope. So, in the
rookie draft, be buying, but I'm
buying.
I'm probably. I'll put it this. Yeah, I'm gonna send out some feelers. I haven't gotten around to it yet. I'm gonna try maybe on Saturday. I've been trying to work at a law office, and then I've been recording 3 podcasts, and I've been trying to write like 12,000 words. So believe it or not, I haven't had a ton of chance to just fire out offers. But that's my Saturday plan. I'm pretty interested in potentially buying. What I would say is more likely is that I have enough of a baseline that if he has some really bad games coming up, we'll try and buy maybe at that point, because I think he's going to. You know, it's not linear.
Oh yeah. They're not always going to ask him to pass 3 yards down the field. At some point, they're going to ask him to pass 10, and that's where it's going to be scary. I'm really nervous for that, but at least they're going to let him pass. And that's
it was not a perfect game from Richardson. Nowhere close. He had a horrendous interception. He threw almost entirely to the right side of the field. Like you mentioned, he was generally throwing short areas. The accuracy issues from college, they showed up at some points. He missed some pretty wide open throws. But yeah, the most encouraging thing was that A, they let him pass. B, like everything we talked about in college about his sort of superhero trait is just not taking sacks and being able to create plays and extend plays. Like that was the case. What was most impressive to me is so many times you get these young quarterbacks that, especially really young mobile quarterbacks early in their career, they take the snap, their first read isn't open, the next move is scramble. Especially if the pocket starts to collapse on them, it's immediately eyes off the downfield and we're just running. Like Richardson throughout the game was moving around in the pocket, evading tacklers, keeping his eyes downfield and looking to pass. And I thought that was really impressive. I thought he had a lot of poise. Probably the best throw of his whole game came in one of those situations on that 4th down. He's scrambling. He throws out to his right. He has Pittman on a crosser, like across his body over the middle, and he makes just an absolutely ridiculous pass, just bullets it in there to go and convert that 4th down. And then just like the vibes-based analysis for me of just watching him, frankly, just kind of vibe out there. Like he was smiling the whole game. He was interacting with the crowd. He was dancing around. When he made mistakes, like he was usually like taking it in stride. He was smiling. He knew where he was. You know, I was watching just shots of him on the sideline talking with Shane Steichen in between plays. And like, it just seemed like he had a really good approach. It seemed like Steichen had a really good approach where they were going to enjoy this moment together of their first game as a coach and as a quarterback. And they were going to learn at each moment and they weren't going to press. And yeah, it was exciting to see them go out and pass the ball, right? It's a whole philosophy thing of like a team that's willing to learn and willing to make mistakes versus a team that's trying to avoid the possibility of him making mistakes. And I think that that's really encouraging for his development, right? You want your quarterback to feel confident and relaxed and like he has the opportunity to make mistakes. And it was cool to see that they were willing to do that. As a Colts fan, like it left me really optimistic about Richardson. It left me even more optimistic about Steichen. Like I feel like we clearly have like the coach that we should have to lead this young team into the future. I really hope that we can get Jonathan Taylor at some point because Deion Jackson turned 18 touches into 28 yards and 2 fumbles.
Dude's a
it
stud.
was like it was egregious. So, but otherwise, yeah, good times in Colts land. And the real takeaway is buy Michael Pittman
Yeah.
because, like, we thought he was going to be in DJ Moreland, where it was like, great, Michael, you earned a 24% target share. What did that get you? 9 fantasy points today. But he's going to real
He still
offense.
could be. Like, it's early. That could still happen, but it's
Could.
trending not to happen, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, like I don't know if you probably didn't read it all because it was quite lengthy, but I did a week one knee jerk reactions on Monday.
I read every single one of them.
Oh yeah, I did tell you to read every single word in it, so that makes sense. It was like, I swear, I don't know, it's the longest thing I've ever written. There was like thousands of messages in it, and anyway, I touched on every fantasy relevant football player in the NFL with a week one reaction. And yeah, my takeaway was I was like, hey, you know what? We're going to talk about Anthony Richardson on Thursday when I do the rookie report. So we talked about him today. But it was mostly like, for the Colts, it was like, buy Michael Pittman. We're getting the thing where the quarterback is like really, really expensive and they might be good, but they might not be good. And I'd rather just make the bet on the wide receiver that it might work out. Michael Pittman was one of this year's candidates. Clearly, it looks like it's going to at least may not work out, but it should be positive at the very least. And then also buy Jelani Woods. The dude is free. He's on IR. Put him on your IR. It's absolutely going to cost you nothing because you don't have a full IR yet. Do not tell me you have a full IR. We're in week one. Your IR is not full. Get him on your squad. Put him on your IR. When he gets back, Anthony Richardson might be like kind of okay, maybe at some point. And Jelani Woods is free and he's a monster. So just go for it. It's fine. Buy of the week, Jelani Woods.
I think I kind of want to buy Jonathan Taylor too.
I kind of want to buy Jonathan Taylor too. That's a good point. Jonathan Taylor.
I just kind of want to buy like kind of everyone in this offense. Like,
okay, slow down. We're not buying Alec Pierce. Stop it.
Okay, we're not buying Alec Pierce, but Josh Downs got 7 targets in his first NFL game.
That was freaking great. Like, good job, Josh Downs.
Yeah, so I think I want to buy everyone except for Alec Pierce and Deion Jackson.
Okay, I'm in. Yeah, and Evan Hull you should buy. I think he's hurt now.
Yeah.
He's on IR.
Well, he's on
Get
IR.
Evan Hull
yeah,
on your IR spot. He's free and
frankly,
he's on IR.
You know who's going to get a lot of touches this week? Zach Moss, because Deion Jackson was the worst running back I've ever seen.
You know, I think I saw something saying in the preseason, actually, they were expecting Zach Moss to be the running back one, and then he was hurt or something.
Well, he got hurt.
Jackson was.
Yeah, he got hurt. He missed the first game. He probably would have started. And my take was like, it's not Zach Moss, guys. Like, come on, it'll be one of the 2 young guys. And then one of the young guys got hurt, and one of the young guys turned in an all-timer of a dud. And yeah, it's going to be Zach Moss. Giddy up.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
So yeah, that's Anthony Richardson. That's number 1 on our week one's biggest surprises.
That's the game that's going to be the most fun to watch in week 2. The battle of the rookie quarterbacks. Richardson and CJ Stroud, and both their teams are willing to sling it. That's going to be a really fun game to watch.
That's going to be fun. Yeah. All right. So who do you got for a big surprise?
Yeah. My big surprise, of course, has to be the Rams specifically. I mean, really everything about the Rams. Yeah, literally everything about the Rams except that Van Jefferson still sucks.
The least surprising development of the week. Van Jefferson, decidedly not the wide receiver after Cooper Kupp was down.
I'm stealing this take from the great Ben Gretsch, but I too am like kind of upset that when Kupp went out, like everybody else bumped up Higbee and Van Jefferson, who are like known bad players. And I should have just been like, well, it's not them. So it's either nobody or it's one of these 2 young guys like Puka or Tutu.
Yeah.
And I wasn't nearly as aggressive with that as I should have been. Like, to me, it was just when Kupp went out, I was like, the whole offense is going to suck. Yeah, I should have probably kept hope alive a little bit more. I did think that the offense was going to suck.
It is one of the least predictable outcomes ever in the history of fantasy football or football in general.
But maybe it's not.
Puka, round 5?
He was round 5. Okay, but maybe it's not like, yes, okay, the specific of the Puka thing, very unpredictable.
And Tutu Atwell did literally nothing last year. Like, there was no reason to hope for him.
Sure. But what I would say is like a little bit less unpredictable is just like Matthew Stafford has been a very good quarterback for a very long time who was hurt last year and was bad. So the idea that healthy Matthew Stafford could just come back and be good is not that crazy. And the idea that him with Sean McVay, who's a really good play caller and has been for his entire time, would be able to form a functional offense like that actually is something like we probably should have been willing to bet on a little bit. And I kind of regret not being more aggressive about that. Puka Nacua, though, 15 targets is the most ever by a rookie in an NFL in his first NFL game. And so I guess that begs the question, he's the best wide receiver of all time through one game. So is he the best wide receiver of all time?
He is obviously the best wide receiver of all time. There's no debate. You make a great point. I can't even I've no leg to stand on to dispute that.
Okay, I have two takes on Puka Nacua. One is the bad one is the bear case, one's the bull case, and you can tell me which one you think is more compelling. Okay?
Hit me.
Okay. Here's the bull case. This is once again stealing from Ben Gretch's article. Admittedly, I just did not do enough work on Puka as a prospect because I'll just be straight up. Unless someone puts data in front of me that tells me that a day 3 wide receiver is more interesting than a typical day 3 wide receiver, I tend to just ignore them, which is probably a leak on my part. But day 3 wide receivers are already such a low hit ratio, and usually we get a lot of information on them ahead of time. Guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, kind of a different story, where it's a guy that we were all hoping would go early and then doesn't. Versus Puka is a guy that a lot of people I don't think had even ever heard of. Certainly some people in the film community were all over it. But transferred away from Washington, goes to BYU, ran very few routes, was never a full-time player in college, which to be clear is bad. But interestingly, had over a 2.5 yards per route run and over a 30% targets per route run throughout his college career. That's pretty impressive target earning ability, which is at least something. It's a lot more than most really terrible college wide receiver prospects have to offer. So that certainly is pretty encouraging. The bear case on Puka is Puka, as I just said, most targets ever in a rookie's first game since 1992, which is when targets became a stat. It's from Scott Barrett. There are 6 other players who had 13 or more targets in their first NFL career game. That's Anquan Boldin, Antonio Bryant, Kembrell Tompkins, Sean McDonald, Rashad Green, and Des Bryant, which is 3 round 1 or round 2 picks, 3 round 3 or later picks, and the 3 round 3 or later picks literally did absolutely nothing of note in their NFL career, despite seeing 13 plus targets in their first NFL game. So you would think that 15 targets for your first NFL game is extremely predictive, given everything we know about rookie breakouts. But it is entirely possible that Puka Nacua winds up joining the ranks of Kembrell Tompkins, Sean McDonald, and Rashad Green as their first game ever was by an absolute mile the best game ever.
Yeah, I will push back rather forcefully on the Puka Nacua had an interesting profile. I mean, sure, he had an interesting profile if he was a day 2 pick, but we see tons of players that look a lot like Puka Nacua on day 3, and they all suck. So I don't think there's a lot of excitement there. However, most of those guys don't go to put up 15 targets in the first game. So you combine the good, bad profile, or good-ish. It wasn't great. It wasn't a great profile. It was interesting.
No, it's a bad profile. It's a bad profile that had something you can kind of tell yourself a story on.
Yeah, you can tell yourself a story on it. It's at a base rate level, it's a terrible profile, but it is an interesting profile. Now knowing that he had 15 targets in week 1, now I'm like, oh, actually, you know what? Maybe there was something here. But from a evaluating rookies perspective, I don't think there was anything there that any of us should be beating ourselves up over.
It was a high percentage bad or anything. Obviously not.
No, and in fact, it's a very, very low percentage bad. But again, you don't stack okay rookie profile, even though day 3 with 15 targets very often. So I think it's interesting. I saw that Scott Barrett tweet, and I was very concerned about it, as I normally am when we have day 3 prospects. And I decided to throw caution to the wind because I don't know. I don't have a good reason. I'm just throwing caution to the wind.
So what? I threw caution to the wind, in the sense that in my high stakes managed leagues where he was on waivers, I was like, fuck it, I'm bidding 80% of my fab because why not?
Yeah.
You never even know what you're going to get, right? You never know.
Sure.
There might never be another good player on waivers the entire rest of the year. So who gives a shit? Let's just see what happens. In Dynasty, you have far more legitimate consequences to your actions. So where's the breaking point for you? Obviously, we're not paying a first round pick for him, and obviously we would pay a third round pick for him. So where in the second round pick extended universe are we falling?
I would pay a second round pick, and normally I wouldn't say this, but it would depend on my team as to how high I would go. If I was like a very strong team and was like a little bit light on wide receiver, and I didn't feel, and I had already like worked the phones, if you will, to try to get another wide receiver, it wasn't happening, then I would consider doing like a mid, certainly a mid. I probably would never do an early second.
No, I would never do early because early you're usually getting a fairly core asset.
Yeah. Early you're going to get guys that should have went in the first round that fell to your second round in your draft. You're not going to always get the same guy, but somebody that should have been gone already will fall to you at some point.
Right.
And I'm not going to move an early second, I don't think. I would move a mid second in a lot of leagues.
I would go for a
team.
I would go for a mid because I do find like once you're a player that kind of flashes something when you're a rookie, like you just sort of have that level of magnetism where like, it's kind of what we were talking about with Romeo Dobbs last year, where you get like this two-way magnetism on these guys that kind of come from nowhere. It's like you're like firmly capped where like it would have taken a lot and probably multiple years for Dobbs to ever be, and same with Puka, to be like worth more than a first round pick, right? Like look at what Amon-Ra did, and he was still worth like about a first round pick after his rookie year. But you also kind of have this area where like you have enough people that kind of have some priors about you now that it doesn't take that much for someone to then send you a second round pick again. Like Dobbs is a great example of this, is where he was a guy that I was like, yeah, you know what? I probably would just buy a first, second round pick and see what happens. And then it didn't work out. I don't think he's very good. He scores 2 touchdowns this week. I was able to move him for a second round pick now, right? Like, it's like, would I rather have the liquidity of having a second round pick all along? Sure. But ultimately you kind of get out of it scot-free after a free look. Maybe Puka goes full Fulgham. But I do think like it's such a thin wide receiver room that he's going to probably be running routes regardless, even when Cooper Kupp comes back. Yeah. And if he can just stay like vaguely interesting, even if he never shows up like you can probably still cash out once you have more information. So after seeing some of the stuff in his profile, getting a little bit more interested in him, and then thinking about this through a little bit more, I'm kind of on your side. I think I would sell any second round pick that I don't think is likely to be in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on the Travis Fulgham thing. I did a thread on that in the Discord as well because it was something I'd seen a lot of. And like Travis Fulgham literally did nothing for 20 games in the NFL before he broke out. So I don't really equate it. I'm like, he couldn't even get on the field, period. He had 3 receptions or 3 targets, I can't remember, in like his entire rookie season. And then 4 weeks, I think he was a healthy scratch with Philly after he got cut by the Lions or the Packers. I can't remember who he was with first. And then he broke out with Philly, and it was like pretty sketchy and not in the same, like in a similar way, I guess, because it was like everybody else got hurt or sucked. So it was like maybe he was earning the targets, but also like maybe he wasn't because he didn't even get on the field for 20 games. And then, so with Puka, and like I had never even heard of Travis Fulgham before he broke out. Like there was no training camp hypes. There was nobody was talking about him. Puka, I got tons of hype in my timeline during training camp. People were loving Puka. So I feel like he was balling out in training camp. He was okay-ish in college. And then he like erupted in week 1. And Matt Stafford's really good. So like he's not a great fantasy quarterback because he doesn't rush. He's a really good NFL quarterback. So I think it's totally plausible that him and Cooper Kupp just like form a dynamic duo similar to him and Robert Woods. And we just have like a very like maybe he's not a wide receiver 2 this year, but maybe he's a wide receiver 3 or flex and gets a bunch of hype and we can sell him for a first come next offseason.
I can agree. I also think like McVay's offense is pretty unique and that like there just does seem to be like a certain skill set that really works in
That
this
Van
scheme.
Jefferson doesn't have.
No, well, Van Jefferson's his skill set's running a bunch of clear out routes and dropping half of them. But
Yeah, good for him.
like it does seem like if you can run those in breaking intermediate routes, that McVay will just spam you, where it's just backside dig, backside dig, backside dig, backside dig, backside dig, and like Harmon when he came out, to his credit, was like this guy has like a really similar skill set to Robert Woods. He's kind of limited, but he wins in these in breaking routes. Like that's exactly what this role is in the McVay offense. And like I think he can do this. And so it's like, yeah, I do think there's kind of a world where even if he's not like that great, I think McVay is just a really good coach at like identifying a few traits in certain players and putting them in the position to succeed, and then just kind of spamming those routes over and over again. And I could see a scenario where Puka is good enough at this role that he keeps his role and he wins in this role. Like I think that I think it's a really good spot for him.
I think the number one thing that I'm waiting to hear is if he's having lunch with Matt Stafford, because I understand breakfast is taken, but lunch is free.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
We're waiting to.
Well, but maybe breakfast is open now because Cup has been in Minnesota seeing a specialist for.
That's true. So breakfast has been open. We need boots on the ground in LA to find out what the hell is happening with Stafford's meals, and then we'll know. And then I like another surprise from the same game was Cam Akers and Kyren Williams.
Yeah, I mean that's like I can't even like victory lap it because I was pretty low on Cam Akers, but I even said I was like when I wrote up that backfield, I was like, yeah, I come out like a little below market on Cam Akers, but I could kind of see it. And then when I wrote about Kyren, it was like I think Kyren is going to have a larger role if you read through the tea leaves. I think he's going to play on these passing downs, he'll mix in. But he has no chance of just like being a workhorse back because he's just not built that way. And so Akers' role is like safe unless Zach Evans takes it from him. And then McVay was like, you want to see about that? And they're like, yeah, this 195-pound guy with no athleticism is totally going to be our bell cow back. He wasn't impressive. He was like 15 carries, 52 yards, more impressive than Akers, who had 22 carries for 29 yards. I think that we've seen this before where like it seems like the Rams alternate between either really liking or really hating Cam Akers. And then when they're in the really hating phase, they'll just put out like a guy who isn't good, but that they think is, I guess, more reliable or just more like flexible. Like we can use him in more situations. And I guess that's Kyren now, but he's still not like he just does not have the sufficient athleticism to be a legitimate NFL bell cow running back. So to me, if you can get out of him for any second in any year, you absolutely must do it. It's not even as a matter of like he can't hold this role because frankly, like I don't know what's going to happen. Like maybe he holds this role. It's just it won't be very valuable with him. We kind of saw with Henderson last year. Like he had the role for a while and he was never very startable in fantasy, even when he was running 80% snap shares. We're not going to see 2 touchdowns very frequently for Kyren. So, I mean, the guy that I would probably bet on really cheaply would be Zach Evans, which is like hard to say because he's a healthy scratch in this game. But if this is actually the time that Akers is no longer in the team's plans, then it becomes Zach Evans and Ronnie Rivers and a 195-pound guy who runs a 4.6. And Evans becomes like clearly the only member of that backfield who's like a really interesting fantasy upside bet after Akers. So that's probably where I would end up going.
Yeah, I'm 100% in on selling Cam Akers at this point. I think there's no hope. Sure, he could have another late season run, but I'm not sticking around to find out. Yeah, it was not what I expected at all. I did not I thought Kyren Williams would play some football, but I certainly didn't think he would play as much football as he did. And like Kyren Williams ran like 100% of the routes, or near 100% of the routes. So Cam Akers is not an option in the passing game whatsoever.
But no running back is an option in this passing game. They literally had a receiver group of Van Jefferson, Puka Nacua, and Tutu Atwell, and Kyren Williams had like nearly 100% route participation, and he caught 0 balls. And he was a like high level receiving prospect from college. That's the one thing I'll give him credit for as a college prospect. Ever since Stafford has been there with McVay, like they do not throw to running backs ever. It just does not happen. So like the route participation is almost irrelevant on this offense.
Yeah, so like I would just sell the entire backfield and buy Zach Evans. I think you're totally right. Zach Evans is intriguing. Yeah, he was a healthy scratch, but he was like a friggin' round 6 pick. Like that's not unusual for round 6 pick to be a week 1 healthy scratch. But considering Cam Akers is probably not long for the team, and Kyron Williams is probably not good enough, and Ronnie Rivers is definitely not good enough, then by process of elimination, there's a chance that Zach Evans gets a shot at some point.
Yeah.
And I would love to be the one who gets cash out on that.
Someone's gonna get hurt, or something's gonna happen, and we just need Evans to get a chance to get on the field. And if he gets on the field, then who knows? Maybe he's brutal, but we just need him to get some sort of shot, and then you never know where it goes from there because the options are not difficult.
We are literally like 3 weeks away from the 1-year anniversary of the Cam Akers trade request. So like I would not be shocked if that came up again. And they would probably just cut him at this point because, like, why wouldn't they? So, yeah.
Can you ever remember anything like this? No. Where a running back has, like, because it's one thing with Swift, where, like, we mentioned Swift's been a roller coaster, but, like, one pretty necessary part of the roller coaster was his team being like, all right, we're getting off the roller coaster and you're going to a different team. Yeah, but go different Akers is just. But like Akers has just spent his whole career on the Rams, and it's like there's been times where they've been so committed to him where they're like, we're rushing you back from an Achilles tear to play 80% of the snaps in a playoff game.
All the playing time. All of it.
And then at other times they're like we would literally rather play Malcolm Brown.
Yeah.
And I cannot wrap my head around it. I don't get it. And the one thing with Akers that I think is legitimately true is that they've oscillated between sometimes they use him as like a total workhorse back and he runs a bunch of routes and he doesn't actually ever catch the ball in his routes because nobody does on the Rams anyways, but he becomes so much of a better runner in those situations because when he's playing every snap, you don't actually know what they're going to call. But they got into this habit last year and they were doing it again today where they only play Akers on the run plays. And it's insane. He had 28 snaps and he got to carry on 22 of them. So every single time he comes into the game, the defense is immediately guessing run, and they're getting totally swallowed. So they got to make up their mind on Akers. If they think he can play every down, play him every down. You're actually going to get a more productive runner. And if they don't, just never play him. But there's no point in doing this goofy thing where they're like, we're going to play one back and be a functional offense, and then we're just going to like donate these carries by bringing in Akers, telling the defense what we're going to do, and then he has no chance. It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Sean McVay, boy genius / idiot, and
he's a smart dude, but the stuff he does with Akers is totally inscrutable, and I don't understand it.
I honestly think that there's like some kind of like psychological, I don't know what the bias is, but like where they just think they're just smarter than everyone else. They're like, we're gonna do this because Cam Akers is a better runner, and we'll just run him, but we can't put him out on passing down, so we'll just pass with Kyron Williams instead. And they won't catch on because I'm Sean McVay and they're not smart enough to think ahead like I can. And I don't know, like these ultra smart offensive minds, they just seem to also be idiots sometimes. Like Kyle Shanahan, for instance, like literal boy genius when it comes to like offensive game planning and etc. But then like any type of personnel decisions, just complete train wreck. And it's so frustrating. Anyways. The moral of the story.
Yeah, it doesn't, and I'm not saying this is like an Akers truther. Like I'm really not. Like I don't even really have like that much of an opinion on Akers. It's just so weird that this player is like both at the same time is like so indispensable and completely dispensable to the same human being. It's really weird. I just wanted to make up his mind.
Like I feel very similar about Cam Akers. Like I really liked him as a rookie. Like loved Cam Akers as a rookie. I was like, oh man, like this offense, like this is one of the best offenses in football. And he's a pretty good prospect, and this is going to be great. And then he tore his Achilles tendon. I was like, hey, it's over. Like, we're just going to hold until he comes back, and then we'll sell. And then he came back. Then he, like, played kind of good-ish, I guess, or at least they gave him a bunch of touches. And I was like, wow, maybe.
Right.
And then I've just been kind of, like, lukewarm ever since. Like, never all in, but never all out. And now I'm finally all out. And it probably should have been a few years ago, but they just kept teasing us.
Probably
He's
too
like
late. I mean,
stretches of dominance.
A little too late at this point, I'm thinking.